that he has a bird's eye. He has a kind of a overall view and bird's eye view to have a look at number of projects that are being executed, and he definitely can point out things which are not proper, or they may be kind of changeable, and that is precisely what we are going to be learning today from Mr. Huck. The second speaker that will be joining you after Mr. Huck finishes his address to you is going to be Mr. O.P. Gupta. He is Professor O.P. Gupta, Vishesh Seva Medal, and a very, very senior engineer. As a matter of fact, he is in his 80s and has seen it all happening there on the project sites. He has been an arbitrator par excellence, and he knows exactly how the disputes need to be resolved. This is going to be a very, very interesting, and please listen to both speakers and make notes, take multiple choice questions today, or who today. They may have a look at the recording that will be placed as usual on the CIDC YouTube. I hope all of you are subscribing and all of you are doing the kind of things so you can make your notes and your at leisure also, but do listen to him very, very carefully. This is a very rare. I have a person who has been looking at almost all kind of projects from the point of view of providing the kind of modern equipment which are going to be making the project execution very, very efficient. So I am giving it to you, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ehtishamul Haq, who will take over from now. And Mr. Haq, what you can do is you can give a preamble to them. You can
Sure,
just talk to
sure.
them and give the basics while Garima is putting the PowerPoint presentation in position, and then you can merely go on with the PowerPoint presentation.
Sure,
Thank you
sir.
so much, and
Thank you.
I'm handing it over to you. Right? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Sarup. It has been privilege to to be present here and talk to all of you. Okay. Today, we'll be talking about importance of contract management for fresh engineering graduates. And the reason for that is that there are very few organizations, there are very few work in the market where only one organization is executing it. Typically, a work either involves you to serve the other company or you are inviting somebody else to serve your needs as an organization. And as this builds up, this creates a challenge because at the front line are the fresh engineers who have no clue about what contracts are, what the expectations are. And then some of these small mistakes, or I will say not even mistakes, some of these small omissions by the young engineers ultimately create a larger trouble for both the serving organization and the client organization and becomes a dispute. My attempt here will be to talk about how can we sensitize our young engineers to understand some nuances, sensitize them, and then they can take it over. Okay. So before I start, I hope we are all online for this. Great.
I believe the presentation is visible to everybody.
Yes.
Shall I move forward, sir?
Yeah, please. Please just come to the second slide. Ma'am?
Is it visible, sir? The second slide is visible?
No, just the first one.
Just a moment. Is it?
Yeah, now it's visible. Yeah. So what's the contract? What is contract? Let's first talk about what is contract. You know, contract is a promise between two or more parties which can be enforced by court of law. Now, the promise is for delivery of product, promise is for payment, promise is for taking certain action, and promise is refraining from certain actions as well. So sometimes companies are paid for not doing the things in the interest of other parties' benefit. And this is something which is happening more and more, in fact, nowadays. Promise of refraining from certain actions. Now, you know, signing a dotted line has been a norm in general, whereas we as an organization at times don't have the inclination, time, or capability to go through that 200-page document, which is written by someone somewhere, and we end up signing it the dotted line, both from a client organization side as well as from the service organization side. Now, contract management is an area where Indian ecosystem is still not at the stage where the contracts are enforced by law in an efficient manner. And that creates its own challenges. But things are changing, and contract management is going to be ever more important going forward. In fact, some of the new guidelines by Government of India are actually making the government organizations very clear that when they have to make the payment and how much they have to make the payment, which is a rarity. This is something which has never happened before, where the Government of India is saying that, you know what, the contracts awarded by government and India, the contractor needs to be paid within this stipulated time. Otherwise, the organization or the, or the department who is getting the work executed is liable to pay penalty to the contractor. Now, that's a welcome change, and that shows the intent in which Government of India is moving. In this context, it is very, very important that our frontline warriors, that is our engineers, fresh engineers out of the project, out of the college, understand what is contract management. Next slide, ma'am, please. Okay. So here we are, in a typical contract management, there are clients, there are suppliers. There are the suppliers of goods, services, as well as goods and services. As I said, in some cases, it is a promise not to work in a certain area. It is also in some cases promise to work in a certain area. All those things are there. Now, how is it related to engineers? So an engineer goes and works in a design and consultancy side of the equation. Of course, the engineer has to work with the client, as well as engineer has to work with the downstream. The engineer works in a project management, same. Even an engineer who works in a sales and service, so what happens is, to the engineer who is working for the sales is effectively selling a sales contract. Now, not understanding the sales contract deliverables create a problem. And this is something which is needed to be understood. The engineers on a construction project definitely need to understand. Even on a software side, there are very few lucky engineers who work internally for their own organization and nobody else is there. Even if an engineer is working on, let's say, a Google project, typically Google will employ a contractor to execute a certain part of the project. And the core of the project is only left with the Google, or for that matter, for a Facebook, or for that matter, other companies, other big product companies like Adobe and Microsoft and others. And then comes, of course, our big sucker of engineering talent and the big employment providers of engineering talent, that is Infosys, Wipro, Accenture and likes. Now, what they are doing, they are just serving a client. Whenever you are talking about serving a client, you are talking about having an understanding of a contract. Understanding the nuances of a contract is what helps the engineer to ensure that delivery is done effectively and in a cost-efficient manner. Next slide, ma'am. In fact, the worldwide trend now is to specialize in the area of their core competency and then outsource most of the work. It has gone up to the extent, especially during the pandemic, that got a new lease of life, that many of the companies are building an ecosystem where an individual contributor is contributing as an expert. And collating many different players into delivering a product or a service is a norm now, and is going to be more of a norm going forward than what we are seeing right away. Vertical integration was the norm in 70s and 60s. Now, vertical integration no longer is the norm. We are talking about distributed work management, and that requires a detailed understanding of contracts and commitments by every individual involved, including the fresh engineer who has been put on the job. Next slide, ma'am. Next slide, please. When I'm talking about sensitization of future engineers to a contract, I don't want them to become a commercial contract drafting experts. There are lawyers there are commercial experts there, and there are others. But we need to sensitize our engineers in how to read a contract, how to understand the scope and terms of the contract, how to manage the contract, what are the deliverables, what are the documentations, when all the approvals are required, when all the certifications are required, who is a person who is signing the approval, who is a person who can sign the person, is the engineer really authorized to sign the work done by a contractor, is the person who is signing a contract is really a person who is authorized to sign the work of progress as per the contract, or additional work which is required. All this requires a very, very serious sensitization. Interpretation of the contracts. What are the key legal terms in the contract? What are the key commercial terms? What are the key delivery terms? Now, I'm not talking about making the engineers expert in it, but having a class on each of the subjects which are mentioned here will equip our engineers to perform much better and take the reputation of the organization as the organization who creates the future leaders and the engineers who are able to go forward, go ahead among the crowd. Identifying risks, identifying rewards, identifying opportunities. When the contract is understood to the last person who is eligible to execute a contract, either from the client side or to the service side, so what happens is we have to ensure that they understand these nuances. The last person, so right now what happens in the Indian subcontext is that at a top management level, the contracts are signed. Neither the client side of the people understand the contract and its subtleties and its rewards, its opportunities, its penalties, its risk, nor the contractor side of the people understand this. Only at the top management level and at the commercial level, the contracts are signed. And then at the execution level, there is a total opacity. In fact, the one of the very big trends I have seen, especially in big difference I actually identify when I look at the contracts in western side of the world, as well as some of the other countries like China, Philippines, where I look at a business, and contracts in India, is that we want to wish away the risk. So the client is putting the risk on the contractor is trying to put the risk back on the client, and the contract itself does not addresses the risk and does not specifies who is responsible for that risk. Now, this is again an area which we need to have a solid improvement if India has to go forward and be a leading light. Our doing business ranking gets impacted because of the poor contract enforcement. And it's not just a poor contract enforcement, it's also a poor understanding of contract by the people who are executing, by the masses in general. That's why sensitizing engineers on this contract management is very, very important. Now, I like the audience to ask if any one of you have any questions. You can either say or you can write. I'm open to both. It seems like there are no questions, and if there are no questions, I look at it very interestingly that either I am talking about a subject which is understood by everybody so well that there was hardly any need, or it's not making sense. Anyway, I will go ahead and maybe talk on the other topic and see if there are some reactions there. Next, ma'am. Oh, there are different stages of contract. There is a procurement stage, there is an execution stage, and there is a contract closure stage. In a procurement stage, the client organizations have to make request for proposal. Typically for any big work, a work scope is defined in a very, very detailed manner, or as much in details as possible. Then there is an execution stage where the contract is executed, and then there is a contract closure stage. And we will talk about each of these stages in the next 3 slides. Next slide, please. Slide 7, ma'am. Thanks. So procurement stage is the stage where the contract understanding becomes very, very important. And this is a stage which sets the stage for, this is a state which sets the stage for many different things to come going forward. In fact, this is a stage which is most important in terms of having a right deliverable or completion of the project with the satisfaction of all parties concerned. From client side, the engineers are typically busy with defining deliverables. Engineers are typically busy finding the technical selection criteria, because not every contractor is able to execute any contract. The engineers are typically drafted in allocation of responsibility, definition of monitoring mechanisms, defining governance and responsibility. Now, these all are the areas where engineers are the one who are the main drivers. But unfortunately, in India, the commercial leads are the one who takes control of this. And the commercial selection criteria, the allocation of contract and request for proposal, it starts getting more and more center stage than all the key deliverables which are needed by the contract in general. Now, sensitizing our engineers in the nuances of contract is something which will help engineers take the center stage here and not depend upon some of the commercial people who are driving them. In fact, in my work experience, when I started my career as a construction equipment professional at Reliance at their Jamnagar factory some 25 years ago, what I saw was a myriad of contracts. What I saw was many different people executing a project, executing a contract, and not knowing even a basics of what is going on, and that included me. I was not knowing what I am signing for. And that is something which would have helped the project in a big way. From a supplier side, in the procurement process, creating marketing materials so as they are invited on the table to bid for a contract, generating lead, finding out the tender sources, finding out the informal sources to ensure that lead is, getting into the organization they are working for. Reading a technical specification criteria, reading a technical qualification documents, and then preparing their organization for those qualifications is another area where engineers can play a major role in the overall economic prosperity of the organization they are serving. Estimating the resource needs and availability is always done by the engineers, and this is where overestimation means you don't get a contract. Underestimation means you are in turn penalized. Having a right balance of the two is something which we have to. I think this is project management is an area which at times is covered in the engineering curriculum. So I will not elaborate more on that. But again comes a contract terms and conditions. What are the payment terms? Is the client paying upfront? Is the client paying at the end of the project? What are the payment milestones? When can I get advance? How much cash flow will be needed? Now, engineers don't have to, wrestle with these, but not having any understanding of the same actually creates a huge barrier for successful execution of a contract in general. Assessment of contracts, risks and rewards and opportunity is very, very important. Many of the times, the commercial departments of the organization pushes engineers from both sides to compromise without understanding the technical nuances. And we as engineering professionals and we as professionals who are responsible for creating future engineers have to ensure that the engineers keep their rights and their responsibilities very, very clear. They not only understand their rights, they are also able to exercise their rights when the time comes and ensure that they are given the right recognition. That's why, some of these areas are the one which propel most of the successful engineers to go for an MBA. Now, an engineer does not need an MBA. Engineer can succeed with the education they got. They just need to have a little bit more overview of the commercial side of the equation than what they are having right now to be successful in the market. Any questions here? Good, then if there are no questions, let's go ahead. Execution management. Now, very, very interesting in execution management, the first point I write is a relationship management. Execution management, in my experience over the years, is more of a expectation management and the relationship management than anything else. Managing the expectations of both sides, clients and contractors. Managing the relationship so as when the hiccup comes, when the situation comes which is beyond the scope of the contract which has been written, the two parties can come to an amicable settlement, or five parties can come to an amicable settlement and resolve it without the need for dispute. The resource allocation. I mean, there are so many contracts I have been there where what I realized was the cause of the trouble was the fact that two or more, two or more parties were not in sync with in terms of how the contracts, how the resources need to be mobilized. The client has not mobilized the resource which is needed by the contractor, and the contractor's resource are idle, or the contractor has not mobilized the resource which is needed and the resource which are on the client side are remaining idle. And of course, most of the contracts are not that simple. There are more than two parties involved. Synchronizing the resources, synchronizing it so as everyone is benefited is very, very important. And that negotiation is something which has to be done by the frontline engineer. There is nobody else to help other than the frontline engineer to start coordinating on the ground for all the resources to be available at the same time to ensure that no resource is wasted. Resource wastage cuts into the profit. Whosoever sides are the resources are idle. In fact, in my humble experience, lot of disputes are just because there's a mismatch in a resource availability from different sides, different parties who are involved in the single contract. Now, engineers understanding this can definitely resolve it at a much lower level, at the execution level, knowing what is needed when in timely manner. And this is what we call dependencies, right? And when the engineer finds their resources to be idle and they are dependent on the other party, documenting that dependency becomes very, very important for either the claim of the extra from the client, or from a client side penalizing a contractor to ensure that those dependencies and those obligations are met. The contingencies which needs to be planned are dependent. So now this dependency and resource is something which is typically defined in a contract. Many of the times contracts are very, very vague about it. And commercial people thrust it upon engineers to accept those contracts. That's where an enlightened engineering execution person actually raises a red flag and says that this is an area where we might get into a dispute and this needs to be addressed. And this needs to be addressed at nowhere else but at the front lines. Contingency planning, changes and documenting those changes, approvals, what approvals are needed, when those approvals are needed, are also very important in the execution management. In fact, what we see many of the time is that contract defines certain deliverables, stages. And many of the time our engineers are working at many different parts of the contract and the stage which is going to result in some payment is not completed 100%. And that means the cash flow becomes strained at the contractor side. That's again where enlightened engineer who understands the contract will realize what is a stage of the project which they need to complete immediately to ensure that cash flow constraints are not bogging down the project. When the cash flows are constrained, the ultimate losers are the execution engineers because the organization starts cutting resources from their kitty. They get less resources to execute the same project because of the cash flow issues, and ultimately the whole contract suffers. So this is again an area where it is needed. Then approvals. Many of the contract talk about different levels of approvals and signatures, which are always difficult to get post facto and much easier to be managed if they are managed live. Any questions here? Good. Next comes, let's talk a little bit about disputes. And I look at dispute mitigation. That is, so here I'm not going to talk about dispute resolution. I'm going to talk more about dispute mitigation. What are the steps and how a sensitized engineer can ensure that disputes don't come at the first place, being at the front line of execution. Dispute resolution is something which will be talked next by my other very senior and distinguished colleague. And I will actually be a listener at that time rather than talking about it. So, a smell of a mismatched expectation is something which is understood, which comes first to the frontline engineer. Frontline engineers see the unwillingness of a contractor to execute. Frontline engineers see the unwillingness of a client side to certify the work. Frontline engineers see the request for additional work beyond the contract. And that's the time when the sensitive engineer, when the enlightened engineer will actually escalate it and will document it and will ensure that those small problem does not become big enough to require a costly dispute resolution. Project progress and timeline. Again, something similar, whereas, on ground status, misreading and sometimes masquerading red lights of the project as a green light. Looking at as if the project, the frontline engineers are first to identify and see that the project is going to take another month to complete, whereas everybody's expectation is that project is going to get completed in the next 1 week. And identifying that area, escalating it both on the client side as well as on the contractor side will ensure that the stakeholder management is managed properly and there is no problems as such in disputes. So these are the areas where an enlightened engineer can actually help in avoiding a dispute and resolving a problem where it stems from. Next slide, please. Is there any questions in this area? Early warnings on scope creep, scope not covered by the contractor. Early warnings on underutilization of resources. Early warnings on project progress and timeline creeps, again, are something which are the major causes of the disputes and can be avoided if the frontline engineers are enlightened enough in this area. Galvanizing meetings of stakeholders. Typical project, especially in construction, involves multiple parties. Typical software projects involve multiple companies with a different expertise, and galvanizing meetings of all stakeholders at early stages helps in mitigating the dispute in general rather than making it fester. Any comments, any questions here? Good, then let's go to the next slide. Now, being in a contract, being on a project also means being ready for the dispute. And when we are talking about being ready for the dispute, an enlightened engineer is ready for the dispute resolution. Enlightened engineer is able to identify the sources of dispute which may come in future. And once they identify that source which can create a cause of a dispute between the different parties, what becomes very, very important at the resolution stage is documentation. There are verbal agreements on the job site, and there are verbal agreements even in the software delivery. Those verbal agreements needs to be documented. An engineer should be savvy enough to document those by saying, this is what was discussed on meeting dated so and so, and this is what we are going to work with. Having that piece of a simple document saying that this is not something which remains a hearsay, which remains just a discussion between two parties, but this is something which is documented, helps engineers in general in presenting their case when the disputes come. Documenting the non-conformity, documenting the non-availability of resources, documenting the idling of the resources, documenting the circumstances. Let's say there are, due to pollution, the construction work has stopped, or due to pandemic, the labor force is no longer available. If you start looking at these things 5 years down the line or 2 years down the line when the contract is at the finishing stage, it's very, very difficult to find the documents for it. Whereas it's really a matter of few minutes to document it right now, right here. Documenting early warnings that project is slipping from the schedule. Asking for the resources which are needed to complete the project early. All these help when the dispute resolution actually comes at a later stage. Any questions here? Next. Contract closers. Contract closers typically require acceptance of deviation from both sides. And that's why I have written there, managing relationship is very, very important at all levels, including at the execution level. Managing compliances. Again, another area which is very, very important, and our engineering graduates needs to understand the managing compliance part very, very clearly. Managing deviations, as I said, there will be deviation in any large projects, and documenting those deviations and getting all stakeholders aligned about those deviations is important. Of course, we talked about documentation. And at the end of the project, we also need to document the key learnings so as organization remains a living entity and does not repeat the mistakes which they have done is at one project to and carry it forward to the another project. These are the areas which I felt are important for the young engineers and are important for the faculty to understand and sensitize our engineers so as they are ready for the industry when they come out of engineering college and they can contribute to the overall progress and overall productivity increase of the society at large. With this, I end my presentation and invite questions, if any, from anyone.
Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, good afternoon. I am Satish Gandhi from University College Nagarkoil from Tamil Nadu. A small question, sir. Suppose if I put the contract for 5 years or 5 years or 10 years, sir, unfortunately, I want to break the contract from the particular concern. Whether the law will accept that breaking of contract?
It depends upon what are the terms and conditions written within the contract for the breaking of the law, breaking of the contract. Typically, contracts have a provision on how to end the contract prematurely, and when the contract is ended prematurely, what are the roles and responsibilities and penalties on each side, on all the parties involved in this area. And sometimes contracts are silent about it, and that's when it gets into a dispute. So the good practice is to mention in the contract what are the circumstances in which contracts can be terminated, what are the penalties, and what are the compensations which are needed when the contract is ended prematurely.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Absolutely, contract can include a project delay clauses. In fact, there are penalty clauses, there are reward clauses, and this is something which is done all the time. So contract delay, project delay accountability is something which is more or less a part of a standard contract nowadays. Sometimes in terms of a positive reinforcement, sometimes in terms of a negative reinforcement. Absolutely, yes, delay is a multi-participant issue. And that's where the resource coordination becomes important. Whereas different parties are responsible for making the resource available at a certain point of time. And when that resource is not available, it causes a problem. Even the availability of a job work site is a resource. So JIT is rarely practiced on the project side. JIT is more of a manufacturing paradigm, whereas you know what is expected. Managing projects typically involve managing a lot of uncertainties, and those uncertainties do not allow you to practice JIT. Contractors can get penalty for anything. For not delivering what is written in the contract. And now what is written in the contract can be the quality of the work, the scope of the work, the technique which needs to be used for executing the work, the timeline within which the work has to be completed, And contractors typically negotiate and agree on each of these points. And then clients agree on when the payments will be made, when the work front will be available, when the, what are the payment milestones, what are the certification milestones. So, I mean, contractor can get a penalty and contractor can get an extra compensation based on what the contract says. And that's exactly why it's very, very important for all the engineers to understand contract. Every contract has a force majeure clause which says that if the regulatory environment changes or natural calamity comes, the contract needs to be re-evaluated. All the conditions of the contract might not be fulfilled. Now, when it comes to Chinese material, let me tell you that our dependence upon the Chinese material is so high as of today, then that ban is totally unexpected. More than 15% of our import is from China. And if we stop that import, I don't think we will be able to continue the economy. It's a dependent economy. And any such supply chain disruption will cause havoc on the India side more than from the China side, because of the size of the economy, we constitute, from a China perspective, out of all the export they do, we are less than 2% of the import, whereas from our side, we are at a 15% of overall imports. So China exports 2% of all their exports to us, whereas we import more than 15% of our goods from China. So in case of this supply chain disruption, India is going to lose in a major way. And I don't think, unless otherwise there is a war and such hostility that we have no options, any economist or any policy advisor will advise the government to ban the Chinese material per se. Some specific areas where the India has got a little independence might happen, but a blanket ban is something which is not feasible in the near future. Any other questions? Then I thank you all for taking out time this Saturday afternoon to listen to me. And I look forward to interact with you more. Any of you want to reach out to me, I can give you I'm giving my contact details on the email on this very chat box, and you are welcome to reach out to me if you want to.
Thank you so much, sir, for sparing time for us from your busy schedule. And on behalf of CIDC, I would like to thank you once again for giving us such a wonderful and informative session on dispute resolution and contract management. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, my dear friends, we have with us Engineer O.P. Gupta Sahab. Sir is, as DG Sahab told you about Gupta Sahab, So I'm not wasting time, and I request Gupta Sahab to please join us. गुप्ता सर, आप म्यूट हैं.
Hello.
Sir, you are audible, sir. Good afternoon. सर, आप मुझे सुन पा रहे हैं? हेलो. गुप्ता सर, गुड आफ्टरनून.
Or
Is it I'm audible to others too?
You are very much audible.
Okay, thank you. गुप्ता साहब, आप ऑडिबल हैं. प्लीज आप शुरू कीजिए.
I'm here. I'm here. Now, if I am allowed, I can speak it.
Sir, please,
No.
please, sir, you are allowed, sir. Please.
Okay. Now my question is very simple. The arbitration is not a baby. I'm, I'm, no.
Generally, if I follow that, I come under those 12 sections which we have identified. Yeah, I believe Mr. Gupta is facing some problems. So, can you raise the question to me? And I will be happy to answer that. Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Sir, your voice is pretty clear, sir. Gupta sir used to start his session, sir.
So, pardon me?
सर गुप्ता सर को अपना सेशन शुरू करना है सर ऑडिबल भी है सर म्यूट भी नहीं है बट सर कुछ सोच रहे हैं सर प्लीज गुप्ता सर आप मुझे सुन
अच्छा
पा रहे हैं
Okay, all right. So I will be basically filling in place of Mr. Gupta now. You can mute Mr. Gupta and I will take over. All right, we will be talking about dispute resolution and how basically the disputes are created in the contract. All of you know that I am not the one who basically goes for any kind of PowerPoint presentation and then profess you on the kind of processes that we have. It's a very simple thing, and for the professors of engineering, I think this is going to be the first level of understanding that we will be talking about. I understand Mr. Gupta had prepared a presentation, but and Garima, do you have that presentation with you? Or shall I speak extempore?
no sir I don't have any presentation of Gupta sir with me sir
All right, don't you worry, don't worry. Okay, so we will basically take on from here and try to take you through the primary lessons of dispute resolution. Now, you see, let me tell you, how exactly do we procure the projects? To procure the projects, the system is that we go through a process which all of you would be aware, process of tendering. And why exactly the tendering is done is to find out that how exactly the monies and the resources that are going to be spent there, the efforts that are going to be made to create a portion of the infrastructure, to create a factory to produce certain things, to create the kind of products that you have there, we require the best of the solutions coming in. And these solutions can only come when we basically let 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 odd organizations who think that they are capable of basically getting into the kind of business that one is talking about. So the process begins like this, that we basically publish a notice inviting the tender. We lay down the conditions that we have there, and these conditions can be technical as well as commercial conditions. And why commercial and why technical? Because I have to basically tell the seller of the services and the product that this is precisely what I am looking for. And commercial conditions that for the compensation for the work that they will be doing, how exactly they are going to be compensated with the kind of monies that we will be spending. We would also like to know what kind of people and what kind of facilities do they have with the organization so that we can feel convinced that yes, they can provide us the services. This is all very simple. All of you are aware about it. And that is how the procurement process, which is known in colloquial terms, tendering, that is actually followed. So this is how it begins. But then what happens is when you start executing the project, it is at that point in time that the things start changing. And how the things change, that the conditions that have been laid down, they may be incomplete. There may be certain accidental situations which were not never foreseen by anybody for that matter, and many other imponderables that basically nobody could foresee or nobody could do the things. There is another factor that comes in. Sometimes what happens is that delivery by the person who is supposed to be providing the product and the services, that delivery is not according to the kind of commitments that have been made. These commitments are in in terms of the quality. These commitments are in terms of the time schedule. These commitments are in terms of the kind of commissioning activities, or for that matter, completion activities. So these are the kind of flaws that lie with the the service and the kind of product provider for that matter. Let us look at what exactly the purchaser does. And in majority of our cases, the purchaser is actually a government agency. So purchaser is the one who is actually going to lay down the rules of the game. Now, what is the first rule that he lays down? He basically prowess of this particular organization in terms of the machinery, in terms of the manpower, in terms of even the financial. There may be occasion when you would not be having enough resources available to continue with the work. Then this particular organization who's going to be procuring, they may be running short of money at times, short of resources at times, so they may not be able to fulfill their commitment. They might have committed few things which they are not able to commit, and that is where basically the kind of disputes arise because of a simple reason, that the costs that were envisaged, thinking that the project will be running in a very smooth manner, in an orderly manner, that doesn't happen. So therefore these disputes arise, and then of course the process begins. So how exactly do we handle the disputes? And what are different stages of dispute resolution? That is precisely what I am going to be telling you now. So disputes have arisen now, and we have a situation where the completion of the project is getting endangered. The two organizations who are basically working together to see that the whole thing is completed, they are kind of at loggerheads for that matter. Everybody tries to find out fault with somebody else, and you would have seen it happening even in your colleges also, when something is purchased or bought, where supplier comes out with some kind of additional claims, and he or she keeps talking about getting more compensations, so and so on and so forth. Whereas at times it so happens that even the college is also not in a position to provide the kind of comfort and the kind of commitments that they have made. So these disputes come. So how do we resolve that? To resolve the disputes, we have three layers of dispute resolution. The first is what you call as conciliation and mediation. So conciliation and mediation is something which we keep doing at our home also. You have your children, and these two children will be fighting, and ultimately they come to you and they say, okay, resolve this particular problem. And you say, all right, I am going to conciliate and I am going to mediate now. So I will be listening to both the sides, and then I will take a judicious decision whether somebody needs to be compensated or not, or somebody has to be punished or not. And this could be either the two parties for that matter. Generally, the conciliation is conducted through mutual consent, and it doesn't have any kind of legal standing, but it is a kind of a mutual, uh, acceptance which basically works. And at the end of the day, when you finish your conciliation and mediation, there is a memorandum that is prepared where both the agencies who are disputing agencies, they sign, and they say that henceforth there is no problem between us, we will continue with the work, and these are the kind of steps that we will be taking. So this is as far as the conciliation and mediation is concerned. Suppose if the conciliation and mediation does not really fructify and does not really bear the fruits. So we go to the second level, and the second level is what we call as arbitration. Now arbitration, believe you me, is a quasi-judicial process. Ever since 1996, when the Arbitration Act in India was put in consonance with what are the provisions in the international arena, and the organization by name of UN CETRAL, that is the UN Commission on International Trade and Law. Because sometimes what happens is that these services are procured where there are multinational organizations who are involved. So the laws of which country will prevail, that is something which is part of the contract document and the pre-agreement that has been made. But fact of the matter is that all through the globe, when you have to provide a particular service, you may have a consultant who might be coming from Sweden, you may have a contractor who might be coming from Germany, his subcontractors may be coming from Russia, suppliers may be coming from England. So then in that case, what happens is that to resolve the situation and to make it a kind of a common denomination for everybody, it was decided that UNCITRAL will create something what they call as model law of arbitration. Now, UNCITRAL is an organization where there are 93 countries who are the signatories of this particular accord, and I think the numbers have gone up now. They engage there in the discussions, and finally they come to a conclusion in all the countries. Thereafter, in the second, what happens is that these laws are basically translated into the kind of national laws. And these national laws are the ones are basically accepted, ratified by respective parliaments of the country. So that there is a kind of a confirmation coming from sovereign, and sovereign is for that matter, and that is how the acted. Under the Indian Arbitration Act of 1996, which has gone through several, you can say, revisions, and very recently the new versions are about to come in 2021. There are continuous improvements that have been made, and the whole process is in a kind of a journey to become far more transparent and far more effective and logical and legal, and that is the process that is happening. Now, under this particular provision, various governments and various courts of law, and courts of law are the last bastion for that matter. You can always go to the court of law for any kind of dispute, commercial, criminal, civil, whatever you have. So without that you have there. One doesn't really have to go to the court. Earlier, the provision that used to be any arbitral awards will have to be made the rule of the court, which meant that even if arbitrators have given their verdict, you will have to take to the court and get it ratified by them. Then only you could have implemented them. But now, what they have done is they have given authority. That is how I am calling that arbitrators are quasi justices of law, and arbitral processes are basically quasi judicial processes. This is the most effective method. As a matter of fact, I will say that this is one where you do not really end up wasting a lot of time, lot of resources, getting the kind of resolution. So, arbitration is something which is the most sought after kind of methodology for dispute resolution. Let me go to the last one. And suppose if nothing else works, it is at that point in time that you have to take the entire process and place it before a court of law and seek justice. And then, of course, this happens in the domestic front also, and even in the international arena also. Then you take it to the International Court of Law, and that is where basically you seek the redressal. So these are the kind of processes that you have. Now, in order to gain more knowledge about it, my own suggestion will be that please go through and check up in your libraries if you have the recent amendment of the arbitral laws. Otherwise, try to procure them and educate yourself. How is it going to be helping you and your students and your institution? That is another very interesting area which you have to start pondering on. Believe you me, majority of the arbitral situations or dispute resolution that is actually being done for the activities which relate to engineering. And here there is a very beautiful situation. The lawyers are not engineers and engineers are not lawyers. But majority of the arbitrators are engineer lawyers. They are the ones who know exactly
What are the legal nuances? What are the processes? What are the systems? Now, this is one arena which none of the engineering colleges anywhere, including IITs or NITs for that matter, they also teach their students. But let us look at a situation where exactly our young engineers, and even the kind of mid-age engineers like most of you are, basically
require this kind of grooming and training. There is a lot of employment potential in this particular area. Majority of the arbitrators, they are basically looking for astute, technically groomed minds for that matter. Why would we not be in a position to train our young persons in area of thing that we should? After all, work program also the same of the country, tone and tenor of the kind of training material or the training content that we have there, which we are utilizing for grooming our students. Those who may like to work as arbitrators or conciliators will definitely have an access, and that is precisely where Mr. Gupta will be in a position, or the construction industry arbitration council will be in a position to groom the young minds. And we are looking forward to have many of the youth who can possibly choose this as a particular area of operation. Until now, the senior arbitrators do not have the benefit of having the young engineers coming and working with them. And it's a huge, huge void, which basically creates a lot of employment and engagement opportunities that you have there. So, this is one area that I would like all of you to seriously look into. Because majority of you are not exposed to these kind of things, we have tried to make it as simple as possible so that you are able to understand. And it is not at all difficult for the brilliant persons who have been taught engineering, who know exactly numbers, who know mathematics, who know basically laws of physics and chemistry, and they have a logical bent of mind. So they are the people, for them it is very, very easy to kind of grasp all these things and take it further. How we implement, how we take it to our youth, that is something that has to be handled and done by all of you for that matter. So I think with this, I will summarize it here, and all of you can basically start looking at it, make multiple choice questions, send it back to us. And I also believe that most of you have subscribed the YouTube channel of CIDC, where exactly this program is also going to be hosted. And take it from me, this is not the first and the last program that is happening on this particular issue. We are going to have advanced programs on this, and I would like to have a sizable number of our teachers, especially the young teachers and the students, to consider this as a project and make sure that the youth is going to be benefiting by these kind of initiatives. After all, an engineer is a versatile scientist. He can do anything for that matter. There are no barriers as such. And this is a new frontier which all of you are expected to be breaking. So, with that, I am closing it now and opening the session for question answers, and I will be very happy to answer that. So, please come one and all, and on both the topics, you can ask the questions. And as far as the dispute resolution part is concerned, I will take that. Looks like that Mr. Gupta has certain health issues, and that is how he is not able to kind of speak out. So I took it on from him, and then I am telling you. Incidentally, it so happens that I am an arbitrator, and both the domestic arbitrator as well as an international arbitrator, and I have been taking care of number of dispute resolution cases. But of course, my time is very limited on those things, and I'm more on education. That is why I personally feel that it is better to basically kindle the minds of many more people so that they can start looking this as an option for their teaching career as well. So with that, I think I'm just opening it up, and I would be welcoming any questions that come from you. please feel free to ask questions, because unless you ask the questions, you will not be able to learn. And if you will not be able to learn, you will not be able to propagate it further. So that is the kind of thing that we do. So house is open now, and I am ready to listen. Can we have some questions coming from the participants? I have this habit of calling in people. So, Mr. Sarvanan, I would like to have a question from you. Mr. Sarvanan, unmute yourself and ask a question. Mr. Sarvanan, are you able to hear me? Mr. Sarvanan, go to Dr. Sudha. Dr. Sudha, questions please. Please unmute yourself and come. Dr. Sudha?
Thank you, sir. In fact, I was thinking
Yes.
about one of the important theories that, in fact, I have also used, which is called as game theory, which is essentially meant for dispute resolution when there's a delay in the execution of a project because of so many participants being a part of it. So it looked very interesting. In fact, I have borrowed some ideas from such case
Your voice
studies.
is
Yeah. I suppose, can you hear me? Game theory. Game theory
your
is
voice
one
is
of the getting broken.
Yeah.
Then
Please go on.
yeah, let me. Yeah.
Yeah,
So what I was
in
trying to
between
tell
it
you.
gets broken.
Yeah. What I was trying to tell you was that
Yeah.
I got interested. In fact, I have done some work in game associated with game theory. A sort of it's called as a behavioral. It has several nuances. So I felt that it was interesting, and later on I noticed that for dispute resolution, especially whenever there is a delay in project execution, there are plenty of case studies using game theory. So I found it very interesting, and in the book that I'm writing right now, I have introduced those concepts. So that is the reason why I was asking Engineer Huck about how the project delays are actually how the accountability can be allocated appropriately, such that there aren't any other disputes coming out of this accountability. So actually, we are all people. Unfortunately or fortunately, we are all people who feel that we are fed by injustice all the time, and so we always are on the lookout for some resolution for our problems. And in that context, I believe that I agree with you in the sense that students should be prepared to know their engineering appropriately, and also know about what can happen wrong. In fact, we have quite a large number of disputes in electrical engineering, especially with respect to power system and the way that we are served with the boards or the utilities, etc. So it is indeed a very good area. And as you were speaking, I was thinking of preparing at least a small project with a small group of students, such that whenever lawyers address our problems, they ask us for the Indian electricity rules, they ask us for the Electricity Supply Act, etc. So if we know our own business very well, it will be easier for us to argue the cases even in a better sense. Because perhaps even as a civil engineer, you might not know the difference between open circuit and short circuit. Suddenly, but we know it very well, and we can say that that this is not the case. That you can't argue for short circuit when it is actually something like an over voltage, which would be the fault of the supplier. Okay, I suppose I spoke too much, but I think, in fact, we have been working in this area due to domestic problems also. Okay, then thank you. It is not a doubt. It is just a.
Yeah, doctor, I think you have got the gist of everything, and most of our participants have benefited out of that. You see, it is almost like this, that a person who can find faults and repair the faults for that matter is the one who knows how to practice the business. And the legal nuances are simply there to sort out the kind of differences that you have. So we as engineers sometimes forget that probably we can do much better than a kind of a legal person or a because that guy only knows the kind of processes, that guy knows the provisions, but we know what goes behind it. And then what are actually the real causes and who can be blamed and who should not be. So I think you got the gist of it, Doctor. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Mr. Rajendra, you had a question. Please come forward.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, in arbitration process,
Yes.
if any item is missing in the contract while preparing the agreement,
Yeah.
so the conductor raised any question. So this clause is not included. Due to some problem in the design or some fault in the contracts, you go for arbitration. Then how can you solve that problem in the arbitration, sir?
Actually, you see, what happens is that majority of our contract documents are actually prepared by engineers who are not aware of the kind of repercussion legal of the kind of transactions that they are talking about. That's one problem. Second problem is that as a matter of, you can say, not documents are to be sent to the kind of legal departments of various organizations where the lawyers sit down and they basically work in their own silos and they are the ones who actually keep on loading it with unnecessary which might be sacrosanct jobs of the arbitrator or a mediator is also to really start looking at the kind of the whole and get the shaft from wheat and almost who sits there and who listens to everybody, and there is a kind of a due judicial process for that matter. So you basically have the claims, and the claims are examined whether they are on the high side, whether they are on the low side, whether there is a logic or not, and there are supporting documents that are given there. Then, of course, there are cross examinations where the arbitrator keeps asking the questions from both the parties, and these querying. This is something which basically establishes the real truth. And efficacy of an arbitrator is actually vested in a situation where he is in a position to see through the maze of the things and find out the kind of real solutions that one needs actually. So there are occasions, and I think this is also one of a very major reason of disputes arising, that many of the contracts also do not have some of the very relevant clauses. And I can cite number of examples for that matter. And then, of course, you have the provisions which are not so articulate that they can be interpreted in a crystalline manner. So these are the kind of problems that is a day-to-day problem. Now, what is the solution? The solution is basically that we have to have the people who have the real know-how of the things. And who are these people going to be? They are going to be the legal engineers for that matter. You know, they have to be like an amphibious creature who can swim in the water, who can walk on the land, who can fly also. And these are the people who cannot be anybody other than engineers. As a matter of fact, let me tell you, I know of many of the legal experts who have deliberately gone through the kind of engineering programs to understand what all is happening. And that is how basically when you have all encompassing knowledge, then you are able to dispense the justice that you have there. So this is, I hope you got the answer that I wanted to tell you.
Yes, sir. That is clarified, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Can we have Dr. VC Satish? Dr. Satish, please.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good
My
evening.
question is, suppose if the legal terms and conditions we are putting in the contract, sir, but we cannot break the contract, means, sir. But in the future, we can violate the law, we can remove the legal and we can break the contract, sir.
Yes, you can. You can. You see, every contract definitely does have a provision of annulment. Every contract. And how exactly the two parties can decide and discuss and withdraw from the kind of agreement that you have made. It is like marrying a man or a woman and then having lived for few years, deciding that, okay, we are incompatible and we cannot live together. And then what do? You go for mutual settlement of separation, get it recorded in the court, or alternatively, you can go to the court and there are family courts also where you can file for divorce, give your grounds, and that's how you can come back. So for annulment, there are always provisions. And if there are no provisions, then in that case, that contract document is incomplete. That is precisely what I have to tell you. Because the contract document is supposed to be a treatise on how exactly are you going to be beginning with the things, how you're going to be faring with it, and how are you going to be closing it. You get my point, Satishji?
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. So now let me also uh, Ms. Bindu Wadla Anuji Pillai. Hello. Okay. Dharmaraju Pillai. Golden Julie.
Yes, sir. I'm Julie from
Yes.
Anna University Regional Campus, sir.
Yes, Julie. Come on. Tell me. Ask your question.
Uh, I'm basically from Computer Science Department, sir.
Yeah.
So we know something about contract in the aspect of software engineering and blockchain.
Mhm.
This contract also same similar with this type of contracts, sir. That is more especially for blockchain. We have consensus algorithms that are based on these contracts.
Mhm.
So we
Yeah.
have learned something about that contract. That's also.
As a matter of fact, I will tell you something very, very interesting, which you would really love to hear. And this goes for all IT and computer science professors and the students also. You see, what has happened is that until now, very recently, the arbitration always used to take place in person, which meant that the panel of arbitrators, including the chair, they will conduct the kind of proceedings, and you will have both the contesting parties and their lawyers coming and joining in there. And that's how the process used to happen. This used to take a lot of time. This was too much of effort, too much of expense, and everything. And then, of course, COVID happened. So during the COVID, people realized that business must go on, and therefore, we have been working at something what we call as online dispute resolution. And this online dispute resolution is a kind of a technology where basically you're following all the regulations and the kind of norms and the kind of guidelines, everything is the same. The only difference is that, like I and you are discussing sitting across the television screen, we are in a position to really start resolving the disputes online. And then there are nuances, and then there are technologies. Now, first is basically the authentication and verification of the documents because you're talking about all kind of legal things. And then, of course, there are hearings, there are cross examinations, and many other things happen where the electronic material is stored as evidence and as part of the proceeding of the whole process for that matter. Now, who's going to do that? We require plenty of young engineers who are coming with the computer sciences and IT kind of background. Frankly speaking, almost uh, 65 years, 66 years ago, when basically we started studying as school children, it was at that point in time that nobody ever thought that we can talk to the machines and the voice will reach elsewhere. Nobody had heard about the computers. At least in India, it was something very alien. In Europe, of course, there were a lot of things that were happening. In United States, in Canada, in Australia, plenty of things were happening. But even at that point in time, we were not talking about the digital situation. We were not talking about the binary situation. We were simply talking about analog computers, which the International Business Machines, IBM, they were the ones who created the first generation machines. And my institute had the great privilege of having the first generation machine at that point in time, IBM 1620. Now just imagine, by the time I finished my fifth year, in 5 years' time, the computer center had the seventh generation machine. So what I'm saying is that things are moving pretty fast, and this is where we are looking for very smart people coming from computer sciences and IT background, and they know a thing or two, and they are in a position to help out the elderly people who today work arbitrators, conciliators. Julie, you got my point?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's very nice, sir.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Likely to
Thank
be
you.
with
Thank you,
Anna
sir.
University. I'm likely to visit the university maybe in next week or a fortnight, and we'll let you know when exactly I'll be there, and I'll be meeting with your vice chancellor and talking to number of the faculty members also, and I'll be very happy to see you there. Okay?
Sir, we are from Tirunelveli, sir. We are one of the regional campus of Anna University, Chennai, sir.
Okay.
It's in
Okay.
Tirunelveli.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I am going to
Thank.
Chennai only. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay,
Right.
sir. It's
Right.
one of the parent institute of our concern.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
So, thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you.
And is there any other question that you have? Any other
No, sir.
question that you have?
No,
Okay.
sir. No, sir. Thank you.
Anybody else who has a question? Anybody else who has a question? All right. If there is no question, then we'll close this session. And once again, my request to you is to basically speak to your colleagues. Let them also go through this particular section, make your MCQs, and send it across to us. Thank you so much, and God bless you all. Okay? Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.